If you enjoy farm podcasts, then tune into Carrot Cash Flow for all things farm business. Join us as we explore the latest trends, tips, and stories from market farmers running businesses just like yours. Whether you're a seasoned farmer or just starting out, our podcast has something for everyone. Listen in and grow with us. Available on all major podcast platforms. Don't miss out. Subscribe to Carrot Cash Flow today.
From the farmer side of things, why do you think it is that most folks just tend to go it alone? Just tend to be like, this is my operation, sell to my customers, I make the profit. Why do you think we, and I say we and myself included, like, why do you think we tend to fall into this slot of, this is my business and I'm going to run it?
I personally think it's kind of cultural at this point. Like if you compare, I'm comfortable comparing normal society to Amish society because, most of our friends are Amish. Like we've been to Amish church. We go to Amish folks' houses for dinner. Like it's like we're very kind of ingrained in their community and their communities are much more community oriented. And so whenever they start something, the community all kind of pitches in to help it. In sort of normal American society, we've become very siloed in just everyday life, and I think that, manifests in business as well. So then whenever we go to start something, we don't think, well, how many people can I partner with to create the best product, the most accessible product? We think, what can I do with my business on my land to support my family, and I think that really creates a little bit of a chokehold for farmers, particularly in, something like broilers or beef or eggs, because it's like, well, again, kind of going back to, our goal is right now if again, collectively as a society, we have to decide what we want to do. If regenerative agriculture is the direction that we want to move, well, then that means that we need to start building the networks and the logistics necessary to bring regenerative agriculture from individual farms into major retail grocery stores. And so that's what we've been, really trying to think through. And yeah, I mean, there's clearly a customer base for it. And I think that a lot of customers don't have access to just, if you live in Nashville or Atlanta or something like that, it's like, well, most people don't have access to a farmer. Like they don't know a farmer because there's so few farmers out there. And so trying to find, you cannot make any kind of product that is regeneratively raised, locally raised, accessible to a large quantity of people unless you partner with other folks to do it. Or unless you just have, if you're like Ted Turner and just own, millions of acres of land, then maybe you can do like, natural rotationally grazed bison or something like that. But like for most of us, like you and me, we're starting out on small acreage. And so if our goal, from the farmer aspect is to like make this style of agriculture as accessible as possible, well, then inevitably we have to partner with other people. And I think everybody kind of benefits through partnership. We don't benefit whenever we silo ourselves,
Yeah, I think there's a very American ideal to like being the rugged individualism, blaze our own trail, go out west, carve our own little homestead out of the wilderness. And, and even though none of us have like come from that life, I think we've all been taught that, or it's just so imbued in our culture that even if we can't consciously say like, oh, I remember the moment that I was taught about, manifest destiny. That it's like, I mean, I can remember going through that in school, but, it's such an integral part to our kind of modern 21st century way of life in kind of not just America, in the Western world. You see companies with last names, and it's like, these are individuals, you think of the Gilded Age robber barons of, building these massive things. And those are the people that we look to as successful, and not the people who were tenant farmers or sharecroppers who were just doing their best to just make a living and survive and maybe earn a super modest living, and that was good enough for them. Like we don't celebrate, we don't really honor and cheerlead those people. We celebrate the ones who were killing it. And I think that's a big impetus around me doing this podcast, is because, at least in this market garden space, it has just been dominated with like, make $100,000 on an acre, or, do $200,000 on half an acre, whatever. And it's like, be super successful. And just wanted to create a space and create an avenue for conversation that's like, let's be realistic here.
Yeah.
It's like, let's talk about like, hey, we paid rent on time this month.
Yeah.
We did this sort of stuff, and we did it, and we had a lot of help from other people, even if it wasn't directly like you're farming and I'm farming and we're pooling our resources together. Sometimes it's more of just, I'm getting help from this person and from that person, and then it kind of all comes in through the farm, and then it kind of goes out its own way. And so I think there is an element of having to sort of shed that Americanism of like, it's my business, it's my success. How much profit can I make as an individual? And begin to think more community wise, which, I mean, we throw the word community out so much, but even if it's just like, the 3 or 4 farmers that you personally know that you can like, hey, we can build something that can weather a storm way better than any of us individually. And then hopefully, because we are pooling our resources together, you're like, I can't even imagine the amount of work it would have been for you to try to get into grocery stores with just your 350 birds.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, exactly. And, a good example of that is whenever I kind of first moved up here and we first bought some land, like, I still don't have a tractor. We didn't have a tractor. And, but like, we need to cut hay because we didn't have enough cattle on there to like graze down and everything. And, and I'm sure the answer to some of this question is, just individual pride as well. Because like in my mind, I was like, well, I got to figure it out myself. I got to figure out how to get the hay cut and baled and everything myself. So I guess I need to start looking for a tractor and, a bush hog and then a baler system. And I got to figure out how to bale hay myself, and I got to figure out how to do it all myself. And then I kind of just mentioned it in conversation when I was hanging out with some of my Amish friends. And I was just like, oh yeah, I don't really have a good solution for this or whatever right now. And they were kind of just like, oh, well, just borrow my tractor and cut your hay. And then, Howard, this other guy, will come bale it for you for, like pennies on the dollar compared to what it would cost to do it yourself, And so like, yeah, I think it cost me, to bale our whole field or whatever last fall, it was like maybe $200 or something, for all the hay we needed for the winter, for our cattle. And, that was all just because, a couple of guys who understood, community a little bit more inherently than I did. We're just like, well, just borrow my tractor. Like, why would you go out and buy one? Like, I have one, just use it,
Yeah.
And so there's a little bit of pride too in not wanting to ask for help, I think sometimes, from folks.
Definitely.
And, so yeah. Yeah, just gotta humble yourself and overcome that one.
Hello, growers. Protect your crops from harmful insects with Modern Growers Insectinet. This top-tier insect netting made by Modern Grower shields your plants from pests and harsh weather, boosting your yields without harmful sprays. Insectinet's unique design allows 90% of the light to pass through and is easy to use with low tunnel systems like our Quick Hoops. It's soft, elastic, and durable, perfect for field use to help ensure that your crops thrive. Say goodbye to pest damage and hello to healthier, market-ready produce. Invest in Insectinet and see the difference it makes. Get Insectinet at shop.moderngrower.co or using the link below.